Imagine you get on the bus after a long day and, somewhere between the third stop and the fourth, you realize the route looks wrong. Too quiet, the streetlights are dim, and the driver keeps glancing at you like he's expecting something. What if that ordinary bus ride folded into a different version of the city? What if the exit you thought you would take led instead to a place people on the internet call Sete Além? If you love weird internet legends, like and subscribe. Sete Além, literally 7 beyond, is a Brazilian internet myth that started spreading in the early 2000s. It grew from a single Orkut community. Orkut was a social network popular in Brazil back then, into a small ecosystem of personal reports, jokes, and eerie testimonials. The stories all share a vibe: ordinary thresholds, buses, stairwells, bathrooms, suddenly acting like doors into a darker mirror of our world. Nobody calls it a safe trip. People post it as memory, rumor, or warning. The tone is half terrified, half meme. And one of the first accounts tied directly to that Orkut community came from a guy named Luciano. Luciano's version plays like a short horror sketch. He's coming back from college, headphones off, book in hand. The bus is the kind of bus you don't notice: tired upholstery, advertisement plastered on the window, the kind of ride that puts you halfway to nap. Time stretches. The driver takes turns slower than usual. What should have been a 10-minute ride drags on. Then an old woman taps Luciano's shoulder, polite but insistent. She asks him a strange thing. "Aren't you getting off?" She says it like she's reading a label on him. Before he can answer, the rest of the bus turns toward him. Faces he doesn't recognize lock on him with an urgency that feels rehearsed. The driver mutters something that sounds like a command. A few passengers say the same phrase in unison, not mean, not angry, more like they're helping him. This bus goes to Sete Além. Luciano gets off. That's the moment the world tilts. He watches the bus pull away and take a different route, one that doesn't exist on his map. The bus disappears around a corner, ordinary, violent, complete. The passenger count doesn't change. The bus isn't abandoned. It's as though the vehicle slipped between two nearby worlds and left its wake in the street. Whether Luciano left by choice or because the social pressure felt overwhelming, the anecdote establishes the pattern. A trivial, everyday transit becomes a threshold into something else, and a group, strangers assembled, acts like an agent of that crossing. What would you do in that split second? The accounts that followed the Orkut thread layered on new elements and variations, but one of the most talked about stories involves a woman named Antonia and her daughter. This one trades on domestic vulnerability, the phone call at home, the brief dismissal of a pushed worry, then the sudden return of a child who has been somewhere she shouldn't. Antonia gets a call. The voice on the line says something odd. "Your daughter is at the stairwell, go get her." Antonia puts it down as a prank. Kids do dares. You tell yourself that, until the child actually comes home the next day wearing a green shirt that Antonia does not own. The girl can't explain where she's been at first. She only hums small, out-of-time fragments. Eventually she says the name. Sete Além. She says there was a helper, someone with yellow eyes, who led her through a maze of corridors and stairwells. According to the account, the girl believes she spent 7 days there, but the clock in the house reports only a few hours have passed. Antonia's fear is palpable in the telling. The horror here is not gore, it's mismatch. The wrong shirt, the jaw-clenched silence, the time that doesn't line up. A mother's suspicion morphs into something else, an almost bureaucratic dread of a world that borrows your child back for a span and returns them with a story you can't verify. The man with yellow eyes isn't described like a demon in a movie. He's a helper figure in the girl's memory. Hands, a voice, the weirdly specific color detail. Yellow eyes. Those kinds of sensory tags, eye colors, smells, shirts, are the currency of these accounts. They make them feel real while remaining maddeningly unprovable. Then there's Julio's report, the mall bathroom story. If you've ever felt the oddness of a mall at night, the echoing corridors, fluorescent lights in need of maintenance, this one will creep up on you. He goes into a restroom, does the obvious thing, and when he steps back into the mall, something is off. The shops on the same corridor are selling things that don't belong. Jars of something unnameable, trinkets with faces, shelves of objects that look like souvenirs from a dream. The people are almost right. Too still, smiles a hair too practiced. And some have very dark, very deep eyes like black glass. Phones lose signal or act like they're cross-wired. Timestamps look wrong. Faces in the stalls of memory blur. Julio tries the exit, but the corridor loops like a cheap set. Eventually, he finds a point of egress, the stall, a particular doorway, a set of painted tiles, and when he steps through, the mall snaps back. The shop that had been there is now a shoe store with a familiar sign. The people are normal again. It's the auditory equivalent of a camera cut. One frame weird, the next frame ordinary, and you're left wondering what was recorded and what was imagined. Read together, these stories share motifs so consistent it's impossible to ignore. Liminal spaces, places you pass through without thinking, act as portals. Buses, stairwells, bathrooms. Time stretches and compresses. People claim days in Sete Além equate to hours here. Eyes become a shorthand for otherness. Deep black irises, unnaturally colored eyes, a gaze that registers as both attention and absence. Commerce shows up too. Stalls selling odd goods, shopkeepers who trade in the uncanny. Phones and maps glitch or go dead right at the threshold. And crucially, these anecdotes spread through a very online medium. Orkut first, then forum threads, memes, and later reposts on newer platforms. The internet doesn't create the uncanny, but it packages it, brands it, and amplifies it until a handful of stories becomes a living folklore. So what explains Sete Além? There are a few ways to think about it, and none of them need to insist that the place is real or fake. One possibility is social and psychological. When a network of people repeats a motif, buses as doors, stairwells as exits, that motif becomes easier to see in ambiguous moments. That's how myths grow. If someone in your feed posts, "This bus goes somewhere else," and another person replies, "That happened to me," you begin to notice the moments where roots feel wrong. Collective attention shapes memory. Another angle is perceptual. Humans misread sensory input all the time. A shadow becomes a person. A reflection becomes an eye. In unsettling conditions, fatigue, low light, stress, the brain constructs narratives to make sense of fragments. Those narratives then get shared and polished within an online community until they acquire a life of their own. Memetics plays a role too. The Orkut community gave the story a tidy label, Sete Além, and an audience. Labels make legends easier to remember and replicate. Once a legend has a name, people use it like shorthand. You saw that? That's Sete Além. Humor and irony thread through many posts, which helps it spread. When something is both creepy and meme-ready, it multiplies. There's also an aesthetic explanation. Urban liminality has always attracted attention. Hospitals, bus terminals, stairwells, these are places between places. They're the architecture of transitions. Folklore and ghost stories have historically colonized these thresholds. Sete Além is a modern, internet-native iteration of an old pattern. People project the unknown onto the in-between. It's worth saying, these are speculative readings. None of them proves or disproves that someone's daughter actually experienced a week in another world. The accounts are valuable because of how they reveal our need to name strange experiences and to find community around them. Whether Sete Além is a metaphysical portal, a collective hallucination, or a cultural meme, the stories persist because they touch something basic. The dread of losing time, the helplessness of being redirected by strangers, the image of a helpful face that's not quite human. If there's a single image that best captures the legend's power, it's small and ordinary. The stairwell. It's an architecture of ascent and descent, the place you pass without thinking, the narrow shaft of concrete where the world seems to compress. In Luciano's bus, in Antonia's stairwell, in Julio's restroom corridor, the stairwell stands in for a seam. Step wrong, or step right, and you're redirected. People who post about Sete Além often sign off the same way. Half warning, half invitation. They don't claim to know how it works. They share the details that mattered to them. The color of a shirt, the hue of someone's eyes, the odd goods for sale, and then leave the interpretation to the reader. That ambiguity is the engine of the legend. It makes the story contagious. So if you ever find yourself on a bus that suddenly feels like a different map, or in a stairwell that smells faintly of something you can't name, maybe notice the small things. The color of the person's jacket, whether your phone blinks out, whether the faces around you turn toward you with practiced urgency. And then, if you're sensible, get off. No dares. No trying to replicate other people's reports for content. Treat these tales as folklore, fascinating, eerie, and meant to be shared, not tested. If you've got a Sete Além yarn, something that happened to you in a stairwell, bathroom, or on a bus, share it. We're collecting community stories on Instagram and in the group linked below. No sensationalism, just careful listening. Until next time, keep an eye on the thresholds. See you in Sete Além.